Welcome back to Light the Fuse. Putting a little musicality in there, Charles. We are back with part 2 of David Dozoretz, which was one of my favorite interviews, actually, in this last little batch. He was just such a humble guy for someone who literally revolutionized the process of movie making. And he shared some more really great stories this week. I mean, we're just really thrilled. And he's just a wonderful guy. I loved it.
Yeah, and we were able to finally convince him to share the pre-vis sequence with us from the first mission. He's very reluctant. You'll hear him be reluctant in the interview, and he was kind enough to share the video with us. We were able to watch it. We're not allowed to share the video on social media or on our website, but we will do screen grabs as long as we copyright Paramount, because it's still under Paramount's copyright. But we can show some screen grabs from that video, so you can go. If you follow us on social media, you'll see it there, or you can see it on our website, LightTheFuse-TheOfficialMission in the episode guide. It's kind of crazy to see that pre-vis sequence and how they look like thumb people.
Yeah.
In there, it looks like those Steve Odekirk like thumb people movies that he made. I don't know if anybody remembers those. I never saw them, but I know of them.
You know, yeah.
We got to try to shake some stuff out of him from MI3 and Ghost Protocol. Also, we'll have to before this episode comes out. We'll try to email him and poke him and see if he'll give us some more.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah, I hope everybody loves these episodes as much as we loved recording them, because he was just really great. And I think that's it for top of show stuff, unless you have anything else, Charles.
Actually, there's one quick thing. I don't know if we ever talked about this on the main show, but when we released the John Knoll episodes, and we talked about the face replacement that was done in the first Mission Impossible movie, in the aquarium sequence, did we ever talk about it on the main show that Todd Vaziri on Twitter did the investigation and found the actual shot?
No, I don't think maybe I have seen that. I mean, Todd does a lot of investigative work, but yeah, we need to share that again. Do you remember what the shot was?
There's a sequence of shots of Tom Cruise jumping out of the aquarium restaurant as the aquarium is exploding. And there's one that's like a medium wide or wide profile shot of Cruise, and Todd Vaziri, like in a series of tweets, and we'll post the thread on the website, and I think you can find it also in the John Knoll episode, and I think we even put it back in the Paul Hirsch episode too, because in the Paul Hirsch episodes we talked to him about the face replacement. But Vaziri broke it down like in a series of GIFs where he made them and like, you know, brightened up the shots and blew them up so you could really see. And there's a shot where it's our guy, Keith Campbell, who we interviewed on the show a year or two ago. Keith Campbell was the stunt double for Tom Cruise. It's him jumping out, and you can see the hairline kind of moves and bounces a little bit and looks a little off, which if you didn't brighten it up and blow it up, you wouldn't really be able to tell. It's still really, it holds up. But Vaziri was able to like do the investigation and figure out exactly which shot it is. And so it's really cool to see where that face replacement was done and how good it is. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I love all of Todd's weird little investigative work over there. He was doing.
I don't know how he has time to do that while he's also creating all these incredible visual effects. It must be while things are loading.
Yeah, render time.
Render time. Yeah, exactly. Rendering. Yeah.
He did a great one recently of Terminator 2. Did you see that one? I shared it on my...
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we'll share that too. That Terminator 2 thread was incredible. He breaks down how he was doing rear projection, and like two different rear projection screens and go motion done in the rear projection and Stan Winston's like full body Terminators in the foreground. It's you got to look at it. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he did Predator the other day too, which was very cool.
Really? What part of Predator? I didn't see that.
Just the landing of the helicopter at the beginning and what went into that. It's really interesting. You should check it out. Again, rear projection, all sorts of stuff was utilized. But he really makes you appreciate the craftsmanship and work that goes into these. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have it. Listen, somebody, I won't say who, pointed out to us that there's an interesting credit on the Mission Impossible 7 and 8 IMDb.
Oh, that's true. That's now that we're in ILM land here talking, we should discuss this. Yeah. That if you look at IMDb, there is a credit. I need to look up what the name of the guy is, or I think it's a guy. In Mission Impossible 7, there is someone from the is it UK ILM?
Yep.
Is credited on Mission Impossible 7. So this could be the first ILM mission since Ghost Protocol.
Yeah. And I think Charles and I have been pretty outspoken about how we need them back, basically.
Yeah, we miss ILM. I'm sure I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Sebastian Nabout.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel sorry. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but that person is involved from ILM London. It says.
So listen, maybe we'll have Todd Vaziri back on the show. Is all I'm trying to say. We shall see.
But Todd's based in the Bay Area, right? He probably won't be working. Is there an ILM London? I assume.
Yeah, there's an ILM London. I believe there's one in Shanghai or the Philippines or Singapore or something. So. Yeah, they all talk to each other. They all contribute shots. Todd made reference to Christopher McQuarrie on his Twitter too a few weeks ago. So I'm trying to hold his feet to the fire. He's not given anything up yet, but I'm just saying if he comes through, we're gonna have him back on the show. I'm sure to talk.
Well, regardless, Todd, you should follow him on Twitter. He does amazing stuff on there. And hey, maybe it'll be someone else from ILM we can get on the show if Todd isn't involved.
We've talked to almost the entire staff of ILM, I think, at this point.
Happy to bring everybody.
I got so happy because I came across some Ready Player One thing the other day, and I saw our man Roger Guyette talking, and I just thought, I love him
Roger.
so much.
Love him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're excited to kind of dig deeper into this pre-vis stuff. Before we go into David's second part, Charles, I got some stuff to read.
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Well, first of all, I want to thank My Favorite Album, which is a podcast hosted by music journalist and filmmaker Jeremy Dillon, where he talks to guests like Fred Armisen, Bob Odenkirk, and Casey Musgraves about the music and sometimes the film that they love and how it's influenced them. So please check that out. Obviously, we did a couple of episodes with Jeremy that we had on our main feed, but please go to his podcast and listen to all those great episodes. This podcast is also brought to you by John B. and also Real Estate Interests LLC, which is real estate advice for growing companies. And what they want to get across is that companies can consult with them even if they're not looking to buy or sell, so they can help companies save and strategize too. So please, please, please check out all of our amazing sponsors. They keep the lights on, and we love them all dearly. So thank you guys. And we will be back after Kevin Blumenfeld's criminally similar music and the part 2 of David's interview. So by the time you're doing Ghost Protocol, pre-vis is like utilized by every single person that makes movies now, right? Was there more of a like literacy in terms of the people you were collaborating with, in terms of what it was and how it could be utilized and all that?
Absolutely. In the very early days of pre-vis, even at Industrial Light and Magic, who was so forward-thinking, I had a hard time educating people or getting them to understand what the process was. This is using computer animation, the same tools that you use to make the dinosaurs at the end of the movie look perfect, but we're going to use it for very rough, crappy stuff that you throw away. and it's very difficult to get, it was then, to get people to wrap their head around that. In fact, at ILM, there was a piece of software that I needed at the time called Form Z that was three-dimensional modeling, and it cost $1,500 per license, I think. And everything over $1,000 per purchase at that time at ILM, you needed to have the CEO of ILM sign off on it. And this person said to me, no, you work in the art department. That's computer animation software. That belongs in the computer graphics department. So no, you can't have this piece of 3D modeling software. This is ILM. Eventually, by the way, I got it. I found a company that would split it into two $750 purchase orders, so I got the software. But even then, it was difficult to educate people. It got a lot better after Star Wars because people listened to George when George says, hey, we should make movies this way. I mean, the guy invented the edit droid, basically, which became the Avid nonlinear editing. He's the one that pushed digital cameras, which were used for a couple of shots in Phantom Menace and then exclusively in Attack of the Clones. And he pushed the massive use of pre-visualization on the prequels. So he's kind of reinvented pre-production, production, and post-production. So people really listened to George when he said, this is the way I made these prequels for half as much as Hollywood would make them for. And everybody started to get really used to it. There's still pushback occasionally, and I'll get into that in a second. You know, the studio executives at the big studios who are working on visual effects heavy films and expensive films, they are all in on pre-vis because it is such a great tool to be able to make your mistakes early, to show everybody what they're working on so everybody's on the same page. I can give you examples of how costuming changed because of pre-vis. And they're completely on board. But producers who are not working on visual effects heavy films or films with $100 million plus budgets, they still have a hard time with it because it's a budget line item, pre-visualization is, that never used to exist before. So it looks like, oh, why am I spending this money if I can just storyboard? That's how it's been done for 100 years. Well, you have to explain to them, and pre-vis isn't for everything, but you have to explain to them that it's not just that you're adding that money to your budget. It'll help take it off of something else. You're reducing your number of shooting days. You're reducing your visual effects budget, if you have that. You're making mistakes early in a computer instead of later with real sets. In fact, I frequently tell people, it's hard to understand this necessarily if you're the one who's writing the checks, but if you take pre-visualization and throw it away, that's the process working. That I now know what's definitely not in the film, you know? And I knew that when, even though it cost money to do it, I knew that when it was relatively little money. So they would not want to have done the snow chase sequence, shoot half of it, and then realize that they can't use it. Or shoot the motorcycle sequence for Ghost Protocol, and then somebody goes, oh yeah, we just did something like that in Night and Day. So pre-visualization is, in the studio system, everybody's completely bought into it. It's absolutely used. There is still some pushback. I know of some filmmakers and some cinematographers specifically who hate everything to do with it because their belief is that this takes away from their creativity. And if pre-visualization is a tool like every other tool, like a pencil, it's just a really fancy pencil. And like every other tool, it can be used for good or used for evil. If a studio says to a director, okay, this is the pre-vis, which we did without you, and you must shoot exactly this on set, and you must make your day, yeah, that's a bad process. I agree with it, with that statement. But if pre-visualization is, okay, do your experimentation now before you get onto set, so that you know if you shoot these shots, you have it in the can, that will allow you to go to set and feel comfortable that you can experiment more with performance, with acting. Pre-vis is not meant to be, okay, now we have taken the creativity off of the principal photography experience. That's not it. It should give you more confidence in that creativity on set.
Right.
That's how I like to see how it's used. Now, there's realities of filmmaking, like everything else, where you've got time and budget constraints. So pre-visualizations, sometimes it's like, okay, let's make it work there. But I'm finding that overall filmmakers, certainly in Hollywood and definitely across the world, they want pre-vis as much as they can. They may not need it for two people sitting at a dinner table talking where coverage will really do it. But if there's anything that's more complicated than that, it helps you decide, how many shoot days do I need? How many extras do I need? Do I have to build all of the set? What's the time of day? How long is the shot? How many shots are there? It's really a wonderful tool to add to the process that sort of informs not just the director's experience or their work, but everybody else's process.
Right. What was the costume change that you had to make?
That was actually for Star Trek. Do you want to hear it? Or?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. That was for J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. I think the same storyboard artist may have worked on that. There was some storyboards of this awesome high altitude, jump from space down to the oil platform on Vulcan. And the original idea for that scene was that the characters, the Star Trek crew, would be in spacesuits that were reminiscent of the orange spacesuits that the NASA astronauts used in the early days of the space program. Remember all those? And I think the shuttle pilots used them a bit too. Those bright orange, and they just scream spacesuit, NASA. So we originally had our characters in the pre-vis in those orange spacesuits, and they jumped out of the shuttle they were in and started flying down towards Vulcan, which is a bright orange planet. So we immediately went, oh my God, you can't read them. You can't see where the orange, especially because it's all shaking and everything like that. We instantly learned, and somebody should have thought of this before, but you don't necessarily see it in a pre-vis world. You wouldn't see that until a visual effects shot is done, right?
Right.
Or until maybe there's concept paintings, but in this case, I don't think there were. But we immediately saw orange suits against a pretty orange planet and said, we got to change the color of the suits. And that then informed, okay, now let's take our good guys, and even though they're all on the same team, go back to the Star Trek, you're in blue, your command is blue, engineering's, or I guess command is medical. The red guy in red dies. I remember that.
Yes. And you gave him a red suit too, right?
And we put them all in those. So now you can tell them apart from each other. So even though pre-visualization is a subset of directing, you don't do everything a director does. You're not really involved in all the decisions. You don't really work on performance and with actors that much. The things that you worry about as a pre-vis artist and a pre-vis supervisor are the things that a director and an editor worry about. Does this shot have the storytelling elements it needs to have? Does it communicate well? How long is it? Is it shot from the right place? You know, all of filmmaking is about, or I should say good filmmaking, is about giving the audience information, whether it's a line of dialogue or whether it's showing you new pixels. It's giving the audience information and making sure that they don't get lost, they don't get confused, but also not giving them so much information that they're ahead of you. It's finding that balance between too little and too much information. Again, both with plot points and lines of dialogue and with what I'm showing you pixel-wise on the screen. So, I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but that's one of the reasons why I went into pre-visualization instead of final visual effects. And I've done final visual effects too. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the people who do final visual effects because it's just so damn good now. But I don't have the level of patience for it. And I think my expertise is a little more aligned with directors in the respect that I'd much rather... You know, visual effects artists have the ability to sit in the movie theater during the screening and go, I worked on that shot, and they're wonderful, they're critical, and they look amazing, and that's what makes film. Pre-vis artists go, yeah, I worked on this 10 minutes, yeah, I worked on this 10 minutes. So, you know, you have to be okay with your stuff being handed off to somebody else who makes it better, but of course we love it when somebody else makes our stuff better.
Right. Charles, have you used pre-vis before?
No, I have not worked at a budget high enough to have pre-vis.
Pre-vis can mean a bunch of things. It can mean, you know, building a virtual version of a set and sticking a camera in it, or taking your iPhone onto a location ahead of schedule.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess I've worked with production designers who have, I don't know what the computer program they have, but it sort of simulates a whole, you know, while we were building sets, they were able to, you know, sort of plop in different things and move stuff around. I'm not sure what that program is called, but
there's a bunch of them.
In a sense, that's sort of like pre-vis, I guess.
Yeah, virtual art departments, we call it. The art department, which handles set building, production design and set building, they've gone digital in a lot of ways too. And we get assets from them, we give assets to them. I don't remember what piece of software, if one is the standard for them, I'm not sure. But, you know, they use it for all their construction and everything too.
Right.
Charles, did you want to ask about some other things that...
Well, I wanted to ask, do you happen to have any of those old pre-vis sequences from the old Mission Impossible, from the first Mission Impossible? Do you happen to have those lying around anywhere?
I have the Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol ones. I have the MI3 ones. I think I have the original one, but I'm not sure I want it out in the world because it's so bad.
But don't you think it would be a useful tool, say, for people to learn about how the state of the industry has come along?
Yeah, I think it's important that we share this with the world.
Maybe, but it's so bad. It's just so bad.
Well, we would love to see it, even if you don't share it with anyone else. We can look at it privately.
I don't think I have it on this laptop. I mean, it's just so bad.
Well, that's actually a question I had too while you're looking around. The evolution of this, obviously we haven't seen the previs from the first Mission Impossible. I assume, as you're saying, it's so bad. I assume it's just, kind of...
I'll have to find it.
Rudimentary. But it's like, at a certain point when you're doing these previs sequences, I'm sure now at this point, and for a while, there was an evolution where you started to take into account lens choice, right? Was that like a big change? Were you able to do that? Because obviously, that's the thing about storyboards. It's hard sometimes is that you can't really simulate what it looks like with a lens, because a longer lens or a wider lens is a very different look for something. So when did that get into your process, I guess is my question.
Lens choice and camera formats, they tried to enter into the process fairly early. We tried to bring them in as early as possible. Yes, long lenses feel very different. They compress, they have less distortion, they're great for certain shots. Wide lenses, lens choice is obviously a huge part of the creative process. But we didn't know quite how accurate our lens choices were in the early days. All the tools and all the software programs have gotten much better, now to the point where people are doing pre-visualization in game engines like Unreal, and you actually have true depth of field when you choose a 35 millimeter full aperture lens. The depth of field will be right, for example. So it's got, like everything else in previs, it's gotten pretty good. But in the earliest days, we were conscious of lenses, but the most conscious we could get is, here's our field of view. We have a wide field of view. We have a narrow field of view. We didn't get anything else out of it. We didn't get depth of field out of it. It was just the field of view. And that, because that was an important part of storytelling, it was in there. We noted the lenses whenever we delivered the pre-visualization to other departments, and we got lens choice from the directors.
Yeah, was De Palma, because De Palma is obviously a very visual director, and I'm sure he's very specific about lenses. And were you working with him hand in hand about like what lens to choose for what, or was it driving him nuts looking at these, 3D renders of this stuff? Was he like, this isn't really what it's going to look like? Was he getting frustrated or anything like that?
No, because again, I got all of my direction pretty much mostly through
John, right?
John. That said, I'm sure you're right. I just don't specifically remember it, which is, I think, my only memory. We're talking 30 years ago. I think my only memory is, holy crap, I got to work with De Palma.
I have a question actually pinging off of that, because I know probably this is a movie that is never brought up, but I have to bring it up. This movie called G-Force, the gerbil movie.
Yes.
But it was very cool in 3D because...
What in God's name are you bringing that up for?
Well,
no, actually...
It was a matted frame, and things would come out of the frame and into the black sort of surrounding the image. So Ang Lee did it in Life of Pi, and we talked about it for 6 months. But G-Force did it.
Truthfully, I'm not knocking it. And it's actually a great movie, and Hoyt Yeatman directed it, and I'm a big fan of Hoyt's. No, I was just surprised that it came up in a Mission Impossible conversation.
But that was, I feel like, were you doing those gags where it would leave the frame and go outside of the frame?
Can't answer that. My partner Brian Pohl was supervising G-Force more than I was. I think when he was doing that, I was on Star Trek.
Okay.
So my company did previs on a bunch of films at once, and I wasn't specifically involved in G-Force that much.
Okay, well, before we leave, I have to ask you about something that maybe also has not dated very well, but did you work on the VR sequence in Disclosure?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love that sequence.
You can say that didn't date very well, but think about how much about that we got right, and it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff right. Now, there was story things about it that were really tricky. But overall, that was an example of virtual reality when nobody had heard anything about it yet. Michael Douglas's character needed to be in this virtual library or archive. And he needed to be able to see that Demi Moore's character was there, but she couldn't see that his character was there.
Right.
So we had to come up with different constructs for, okay, she's a wireframe with a picture on it. And I remember, I think I was working with George Hull, and I think Ty Ellingson was the art director on that one. And Ty Ellingson is a mentor of mine, and you got to talk to him if you ever can. He's amazing. And we spent months trying to think of the best way to do that. And that was the best we could come up with at the time. But at the same time, when I think about it now, 30 years later, I mean, there's not a whole lot else. You could have made it look a little more sophisticated, but as far as storytelling constructs, it was, I think, the right thing to do.
Charles, do you remember this sequence at all?
Yeah, I remember the movie. I don't remember this sequence.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Michael Douglas goes into this hotel room and steps onto this pad. There was a scanner that needed to scan his... He put on virtual reality goggles. There was a laser that scanned his position every second so that would be mirrored, theoretically, in the virtual environment. And it was Michael Crichton's genius, the writer of the book, but they knew that you had to be able to capture somebody's position and shape in order to represent it in a virtual environment and feed information to their eyes. And there was a lot that was even 30 years ago right about that. Yeah, I worked on that one. I mean, I was very lucky in my career in that I worked in the ILM art department because I got to touch a dozen films a year. And, the first movie I ever worked on was Jurassic Park. I was like 20. So I was really, really lucky about being in the right place at the right time.
So you got to work with Crash on Jurassic Park?
Crash McCreery? No. Yeah. He worked directly for Steven.
Okay.
And I worked at ILM directly for Ty and Dennis Murin.
Okay.
I never got to interact with Crash directly. But I got to work on Forrest Gump, which I'm actually very, very proud of.
That's cool.
And Star Trek movies there. Dragonheart, Casper. And I saw some Dragonheart footage the other day for some reason. And it's just amazing what they got done.
Yeah, I was sending Charles I don't know if you saw any of the stuff that Henson had made for it that was discarded. Because
for Dragonheart?
Yeah, for Dragonheart.
No, I didn't. I've seen the famous, or maybe I did back then, I've seen the famous, Jurassic Go motion tests and everything. And was involved in, a lot of the Jurassic Park work. There was talking about my buddy Ty Ellingson again, there was a shot in Jurassic where all these Gallimimus, the sort of ostrich dinosaurs, run over this big branch and chase the heroes. And Dennis wanted to sort of get reference about what just random running looked like. So he had all of the computer animators and me and Ty out to the back of ILM in the parking lot. And they set up this huge PVC pipe. And we ran over this thing in front of footage. And Ty fell and broke his arm.
What?
And I'm pretty sure that if you look carefully, you can see in Jurassic one of the Gallimimus fall. And that's Ty.
Wow.
Yeah. Visual effects injuries.
You've worked on 3 movies, and I'm assuming you've seen the rest of the Mission Impossible movies, right?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we ask everybody, if you are listening to the podcast as you claim, we ask everybody this question. First, I'm going to ask you if you could rank Tom Cruise's hairstyles.
Oh, crap.
From best to worst, or worst to best, or maybe your top 3.
Well, no offense to Tom, because he's always been incredibly nice to me. All I can do is put them in 2 categories: good and not good.
Okay.
And 1, 3, 4, 5, they're all good. It's just 2 that didn't work for me.
So what you're saying is you're a short hair guy.
Yeah, I don't think the floppy works.
But you worked on
as good as the other.
Yeah, but Ghost Protocol, the movie you worked on, beautiful head of hair.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just saying. It's hard for us too, but
You know, what I really should say is that as a pre-visualization artist, short hair is easier to handle in pre-vis when, you're moving around and running, because we're not, so. No, I mean, it's Tom Cruise. He always looks good.
I don't know if you've seen the paparazzi photos, but the new one, he's very short, so you're going to be happy. The haircut is closely cropped.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, okay. The next question, obviously, can you rank your favorite Mission Impossible movies? Can you rank them from best to worst or worst to best?
And just the ones I worked on, or all of them?
No, all of them.
My favorite Mission Impossible movies out of all of them. I think all of them have a really, really, they bring something new to it, and they're all really great, and they're all fresh, and the performances are all good, and the production value is all amazing. I just enjoyed the first one the most because it was so courageous to do it, I think. Nobody was making movies from TV shows. I think it was a really innovative experience. Now, that's not to say that I didn't like all of the other ones. I did. Certainly, MI3 was really intimate. 4 had a lot of scale to it. The one that I rewatched, Fallout, I thought was full of surprises and really high production value. But my instinct is I kind of enjoyed the experience of 1 the most. Because now the thing is, I mean, they're great, but they've established their own genre. They've got their own conventions. You're seeing the mass gag. You're seeing some great action that's really phenomenal, but your brain almost expects it a little bit. And sometimes when you're watching Mission Impossible, you're going, is he going to pull off his mask? Is he going to pull off his mask? You know that you're going to have maybe one of those room gags where the room is actually on a set.
Right.
So it's wonderful stuff, but it's very difficult to surprise a Mission Impossible fan anymore. So
unless you tell us that Harrison Ford was
Harrison Ford, I was just going there. Harrison Ford shows up in the last 2 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Man, that would have been cool. If you ever get one of the writers like Andrew Nemec or Josh Applebaum or JJ on this thing, you got to ask him about that, because I want to know. I want to know what happened to that. So that's why Mission Impossible, the first one, it had that storytelling freshness to it, and that sort of purity of experience that makes it kind of my favorite, I think.
Yeah. It was just on FX last night, and I was watching it again. Just because it was on.
It holds up.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Amazing stories, and I never want you to minimize your place in movie history, because I feel like you have contributed so much.
I didn't know I had a place in movie history, but thank you for saying that.
Yes. But thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
My pleasure.
We're back, Charles, but we're sad to see him go,
Yeah, he was great, and it was just amazing to talk to him. I mean, it's a pioneer. Like, it's so cool. Like you said in the interview, you don't want him to minimize his place in cinema history. He's done some really, really cool stuff. I mean, like the as much as I think people shit on the prequels, like the pod race was a big deal, and he was a big creative force in helping make that thing possible.
Yeah, I think that, you and I kind of have our ideas about pre-vis and how it maybe adversely impacts production. But I think talking to him and then a couple of other guests in the future, which we haven't announced yet, but we'll be talking to them soon, has given me sort of an appreciation of the place of pre-vis, the way that it gives every stakeholder an opportunity to sign off on something, months before they shoot it.
Right.
That it really is a key creative tool to the way movies are made today, and we wouldn't have that tool without David. So
yeah, and how it saves money for them, and it's a kind of it was really eye opening talking to David about all this. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to bring up too. You brought up Crash McCreery,
Yes.
And I wanted to say that we should clarify who that is, and maybe we can post some pictures on the website of stuff he's done.
Oh, yes. I would love to talk about Crash. Crash is an ILM concept artist, and he is absolutely amazing. I think people will probably remember him from Jurassic Park. Some of his artwork actually made it into the movie. The scene where our buddy Joe Mazzello and the Jello is jiggling, that graphic of the Velociraptor behind him is actually a piece of Crash McCreery concept art.
Oh, wow.
And then he did stuff like all the Pirates of the Caribbean creatures are him and the Gore Verbinski ones. He's a production designer or art director. I forget what his credit is on Rango. So he did all those amazing characters in Rango. And he's just awesome. I think he's one of the great kind of monster guys of the current era.
Yeah.
And he's just brilliant. So yeah, he's the best. So we'll put some cool Crash art up for sure.
Yeah. I also want to tease next week. We've got our crossover with the KingCast guys.
Oh, okay. That's fun.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. They do a whole podcast about Stephen King and adaptations of Stephen King's books. That's Eric Vespi and
Scott Wampler.
Scott Wampler.
Yeah.
That's a fun talk that we have with them. We do a little crossover, just talking about Brian De Palma. Kind of kicked off both of our podcasts in a way, because Brian De Palma did the first Stephen King adaptation with Carrie, and he did the first Mission Impossible adaptation in 1996. So we talk about that. We talk about a lot of fun stuff. It was really great to have those guys on the show. And then beyond that, we have Matthew Pearl coming on the show, who is a best-selling author, and he dug up some really fun stuff for us about the Untouchables. As you've brought up on the show before, there's a train sequence that was originally planned for the Untouchables that, because of budget cuts, they ended up doing the train station, the famous staircase sequence that references Battleship Potemkin in the Untouchables. Originally, it was meant to be a train chase. It was on a train, and that's what eventually evolved to De Palma doing that sequence for Mission Impossible in the climax of Mission. And so Matthew Pearl reached out to us, and he has a researcher who goes through archives and stuff. He was doing a whole article about Elliot Ness, and he found the script pages for that train sequence for the Untouchables, and so we break that down and talk about it. It's a really fun chat. Matthew is awesome, and he's trying to steal your spot on the podcast,
yes,
the same way that Carly is trying to steal my spot on the podcast.
Yes. And Matthew has already recorded a Patreon exclusive episode that's coming up soon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's a fun one too, because he talks about, he did coverage for The Fugitive 2. That was not U.S. Marshals, the one with Wesley Snipes. There was a sequel that was planned with Harrison Ford, with Richard Kimball going on the run again. And so he gives us the whole rundown of The Fugitive 2 and what that was, which is really funny and great. So yeah, that's a really great Patreon episode. So again, patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Please sign up. There's so much good stuff on there. Also go to TeePublic, buy a shirt or anything. All that, it supports the show. It makes us be able to do this show on a weekly basis. If you go and buy a shirt or a pin or a magnet, anything over there, every dollar counts. That or the Patreon, or just, write us a review. Please write us a review wherever you listen. Give us a rating, all that stuff. Everything helps. Tell your friends. Follow us on social media at LightTheFuse-Pod on Instagram and Twitter. We're also on Facebook, and I think, we're on Reddit too. Yeah, a special thank you to Jacob from Holland. Jacob's been with us for so long. We love him so much. A special thank you to our intern, Abby Smith. And also a thank you to Luke Burson, who mixed and edited this episode, and to Kevin Blumenfeld, who provided us with our wonderful music.
Jacob just watched Strange Days, thanks to our Angela Bassett episode. So.
Oh, our Patreon episode about Angela Bassett?
Yeah.
How did he get Strange Days? It's not even streaming anywhere.
There's a UK Blu-ray that is Region 2 that he watched. So he and I were talking about this earlier this week, but he loved it. So that's great.
That's awesome. I haven't seen that movie in years. Is there a Blu-ray even?
No.
Here in the States? No? God,
no.
That's terrible.
So anyway, what I'm trying to say is our Patreon is really fun, and you can really engage with it, we hope. So yeah, please sign up, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.